Fantastic. Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining for the just for the entire community guild meeting as well as the demo. Without further ado, honestly, I'm just going to get started sharing here. I have a presentation that's going to be up as normal. We just figured that doing this demo at this time for community is probably a good idea since you guys one of the primary consumers of the framework, and we'd like to get the feedback before cutting the release and stuff like that to make it more proper so that we can pivot or change things or make sure that we don't accidentally break something massive that you guys are using. But since this is only a patch release, I don't think we're going to be doing that. So 254 release. One of the new features that we added was a new command called MFTF doctor command. You can see here, I have a little screenshot of what happens when you use doctor. It just basically verifies a couple of the common environment configuration problems that happen, namely to see if MFTF can get an API token via curl, which checks things like your whether or not the Magento base URL is correct, or the password or the username that you pass in, just basic environment variables like that. Next up is connecting to Selenium to see if MFTF can actually connect to Selenium. After that is actually checking connectivity between Selenium and the Magento instance itself, which is an additional link. This one's fairly important. As you can see in my environment here, it's kind of hard to read due to the color contrast, but it said failed to load page. Please check Selenium browser session has access to Magento instance. So this can happen if you're doing stuff like if you have the Docker Selenium container. You need to make special forwarding in the or port mapping in the hosts file of the container right here, which I'm running, and I purposely broke it so that you can see that it actually shows that there's a problem connecting between Selenium and the Magento instance. Same thing for the storefront, and then same thing for magentoCLI. Another more or less regular problem child back in the day when people would forget to copy the htaccess file or even copy the command PHP file at all. I'm not going to run this as part of this demo. On my machine specifically, it hangs up around the Selenium part. Can't really replicate that on anybody else's computer internally. But if anybody has any problems running this, please by all means do let us know. So next up, traceability. New artifacts added to data actions. This one's pretty self-explanatory. A couple of releases ago, we added the request body and the request data. And we just wanted to add the endpoint as well as the request headers as well to the Allure artifacts. Why wasn't this added to begin with? Well, it was, but we found a bug due to the way that we were implementing this. It was Allure specific kind of, but it would have problems whenever artifacts that were exact duplicates were added to a test. So if you had to create categories, the endpoint of the second create category would not show up, essentially. So we just needed to make some adjustments on our part. And I will show this live here in a minute. I can run a test and show this enhancement as well as this new enhancement. Browser logs cannot be saved to Allure steps. This is feature toggleable within the env. It's not on by default since it kind of loads up the Allure port, and it's not necessarily always useful. However, we got a bunch of people requesting saying that they wanted to be able to see any browser logs that were caused by any step in the Allure report, and that's exactly what this is. You just put up enable browser log in the env file, set it to true, and optionally you can turn on a browser log blacklist in the env. Again, useful for filtering out logs you don't care about, and it's filtered by source, comma separated. So by source, I mean literally if you run this and then you see, oh hey, I don't care about these other sourced browser logs that are being thrown up in a test for some reason. If my integration is throwing them up in their noise, you can just filter them out just by this string right here. So let me switch over here. I'm going to, I already generated a test storefront verify secure URL redirect downloadable. I already generated it. I'm just going to run it just to show you guys some of the artifacts. Let me make sure that my output is cleared. It is. Let's just go ahead and run it. I'll bring up the VNC view or the VNC window with my MFTF or with my Selenium. And this test is the reason why we chose it is I chose it for this demo is because it does a lot of the standard persisting data going through Magento, it gets a couple of browser logs, or a couple of browser logs are injected in the middle of steps due to some credit card stuff. And it's actually also fairly quick. All right, cool. Something's wrong with Magento instance, so this would be an interesting report. That's actually fine. The test should. Is that right? Catch flush. Maybe it doesn't actually care what happens there. Whatever. Either way, let's just go ahead and generate the allure report via allure serve, and then the path to the allure results folder right in there. Cool. We have features by stories right here. And you can see enhancement number 1, API endpoints, as well as request headers. Again, this kind of stuff is useful since the persistence mechanisms are maybe a little dense and a little difficult to figure out. We wanted to add all of this stuff to the actions so that you guys can see what exactly MFTF is trying to spit at the Magento instance to maybe try to do some debugging. Obviously, the response data is only ever there if there's valid response data, but stuff like the request headers and the API endpoint should all be there to help you guys figure stuff out in case you're running into problems. So enhancement number 2 right here, just click on sign in button and wait for page load. For some reason, this action specifically, the browser log is thrown during here, and you can see the message right here. Display includes a password, credit card, there's input, non-secure context, blah, 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 and it has something to do with Google. I'm not personally familiar with this error, but you can see that there's a bunch of stuff here. And again, if I wanted to just filter these out, I literally copy this out, go to my .env, and do browser. I don't remember off the top of my head what it is actually. One moment. Browser log blacklist. There we go. Browser log blacklist equal to other. By default, if you just take a look at our documentation in our .env.example file, other is set there because other is not necessarily, from what I understand, it's not necessarily JavaScript errors or AJAX or stuff that people might necessarily care about. They're just literally other browser logs. But yeah, those are those 2 features. Customizability, we have a new magentoCLI attribute for timeout. Defaults to 60 and previously hard-coded. Now, what does this timeout actually mean? It's how long the test is going to wait for a response from the CLI before moving on with the execution, right? So it's not that, okay, after 60 seconds, if there's no response, the test is going to fail. No, the test is actually just going to continue. This might seem like a little bit of a weird enhancement, but it's actually pretty necessary for certain CLI actions that do stuff like spin up daemons to keep track of cron running or cache flushing or whatever. Or if for some reason your CLI is going to take a really long time, something like switching to developer mode or production mode in the middle of a test, you want to set this timeout fairly high because then you have to wait before continue, right? Like we by default, this 60 hard-coded, it would wait 60 seconds if you tried to do developer mode set or production mode set. And then after that 1 minute, it would just continue executing the test, but the Magento instance was absolutely not ready, especially on build machines. So that's why it's now an attribute. Again, it's moving on with test execution. You're not going to get new errors because it didn't return anything. And lastly, the thing that I want to point out is community issues PRs that were solved in this release. We've been making an extra effort in the past couple weeks since our last release to make sure that we start addressing you guys' PRs and issues much more timely because we really do appreciate them. And included in this Magento release or MFTF release is solving one issue. And thank you, Navar, for reporting this about retrieve entity field generation and action groups not working correctly. And the one PR that we have included in this release is from, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce this, but so I'm not going to bother. But it's the ability to include multiple non-primitive types in an array for metadata in persistence mechanisms. This is kind of a mouthful, but it was a very good PR, and we appreciate it. That kind of does it for the MFTF 254 demo. We're wanting to cut this release tag later today. I don't think there's anything particularly controversial in this release. It's mostly minor enhancements. But we're going to be focusing also on trying to get some feedback before we cut the release so that we have a little bit more time to pivot, kind of shift our timing to make sure that your guys' needs are being met. Cool. Any specific questions on release demo or release contents? Anybody? If not, then I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Kevin.